There's something deeply profound, almost ancient, in the act of giving someone a compliment. It's not just about saying something nice to flatter them. No, much more than that. It's a signal, a marker of attention, of truth, and of intimacy. And women, in particular, incredibly attuned to whether that signal is authentic or just a hollow echo of what you think they want to hear. That's why, above all else, sincerity matters. In a world saturated with empty words, social media is full of people telling each other how amazing they are, how beautiful they look, tossing around superlatives like candy at a parade. But none of it lands, none of it sticks, because everyone knows it's surface level. So when you give a compliment, and it's real, and it comes from a place that's grounded in honest perception, it cuts through all that noise like a clean line of light. It's rare, and people, women especially, notice rare things. You can't fake this. You shouldn't fake this. If you see something admirable in someone and it genuinely moves you, you have to articulate that as clearly and honestly as you can. Because there's a difference between saying, "You look great tonight," and saying, "There's something about the way you carry yourself this evening. It's striking." One of those lines could come from anyone. At any time, the other is yours. It's specific. It's rooted in what you personally are observing and valuing. Women have an incredible radar for emotional truth. Always conscious, but it's always active. They're wired for social complexity, for subtle cues. When you tell a woman something about herself that you admire, and you say it with even a whisper of manipulation or performance, she'll feel it. Maybe not right away. It won't sit right. And if it doesn't sit right, it doesn't bond. That compliment becomes a lost opportunity, or worse, a red flag. When you compliment sincerely with humility and attention, it does something far more meaningful than just make someone smile. It tells her that you're seeing her, not just looking at her, but really perceiving who she is. And that, frankly, is rare. It's vulnerable too. In giving a real compliment, you're exposing yourself. You're saying, "I've noticed something worth admiring, and I'm willing to say it out loud." That takes courage, and courage is attractive. And it doesn't mean you have to be poetic or brilliant. Mean you need some kind of linguistic fireworks. What you need is honesty. You need to be aware of what you find admirable and as brave enough to speak it. It could be as simple as, "I really respect how patient you were with your friend today." That's not flattery. That's not performance. That's truth. And truth creates connection. You want to make a woman feel something real. Don't try to impress her with charm. Impress her with attention, with honesty, with your willingness to say something that most people don't take the time to notice, let alone articulate. If you do that, you'll stand out, not because you're loud or clever or smooth, but because you're present. And in a world where everyone's busy pretending, being present is powerful. We have this unfortunate tendency culturally to reduce women to what we see on the surface. We do it automatically, without malice, without even noticing. We say things like, "You're beautiful," or "You look stunning tonight." And while there's nothing wrong with recognizing beauty, subtle trap in always starting and ending there. Because beauty is obvious. It doesn't require much effort to notice. But a woman's mind, her intellect, her ideas, those are the deeper waters. And when you take the time to compliment that, you're saying something that most people overlook. That's not trivial. Just some clever dating trick. That's a philosophical stance. It's a decision to treat her as a whole person, not a highlight reel. Let's be honest, anyone can compliment someone's appearance. It's low effort. But to compliment how she thinks, how she processes the world, how she expresses an idea, that means you're really listening. You're not just reacting to her presence. You're engaging with her being. Women are drawn to that, and not because it flatters their ego, but because it affirms their value in a way that aligns with their deeper identity. When a woman hears the way you explain things, it's sharp, it's grounded, it makes people stop and think. What she's really hearing is, "I see you. I respect your intellect. Value what you bring into a conversation." And that is powerful. You see, attraction isn't just about spark, it's about resonance. And the mind is where resonance begins. When you express admiration for how a woman interprets the world, you're inviting her to show you more of it. You're giving her permission to let her mind expand into the space between you. That builds trust. That builds connection. And trust, especially between two people trying to figure out if something meaningful can exist, is more foundational than chemistry. Chemistry fades. Trust roots itself. Now, this doesn't mean you should ignore the physical. No, there's a place for those compliments too. But if that's all you offer, you're telling her in a very quiet way that that's all you're interested in. And if she's a woman of depth of substance, and most women are, when given the room to be, then you're going to miss her entirely. You're going to engage with the outer shell and never reach the soul. Out what happens when you say, you always bring such a unique perspective, or I really admire how articulate you are. It's not just what you say, how you say it. That's not just praise. That's recognition. And recognition is one of the deepest forms of respect. It says, you're not invisible here. I notice your mind's mine. I value you want a woman to open up to you. Then demonstrate that you're capable of more than superficial observation. Show her that you're paying attention not just to how she looks, but to who she is, to how her ideas form, how she thinks through a problem, how she holds complexity. The real gold is. That's where affection moves beyond attraction and starts becoming something profound. Because in the end, don't fall for the guy who sees what everyone else sees. They fall for the man who notices what others miss and says it out loud. There's something almost sacred about paying attention. And I don't mean glancing. I mean us really paying attention so deeply that you start to notice the subtleties that most people gloss over. And if you want to offer a compliment that genuinely moves a woman, you have to step into that level of awareness. You have to look beyond the obvious, where the truth lies. That's where connection starts to take shape, not in the grand gestures, the quiet observations that signal you're actually seeing her, not just looking at her. We've got this cultural obsession with boldness, flashy compliments, loud declarations, big moments. But you know what really speaks to a person's heart? It's when you pick up on the small things. When you notice she always chooses the same corner seat in a cafe because it faces the window. She pauses for half a second before responding in difficult conversations, not because she's unsure, but because she's deliberate. You tell her, I noticed how you stayed quiet in that moment, not because you didn't care, because you wanted to understand first, and now you've stepped into something meaningful. That's not charm. That's reverence. And reverence changes people. A woman hears a compliment about something that isn't immediately visible to everyone else. Some quiet habit, some subtle pattern she didn't even realize as she was doing, that lands completely differently. It's not just flattering, it's disarming. Because for one brief moment, she's not performing, she's not trying to be seen, she is seen, and that can bring her closer to you faster than 1,000 empty words ever could. But here's the thing, you can't fake this kind of attention. It has to come from a genuine desire to understand who she is beneath the surface. You have to be curious, not in the way someone's curious about a puzzle, but the way someone's curious about a landscape they've never explored. There's no map. You're learning as you go. And as you learn, you speak up. You say, I love the way your eyes shift when you're focused. You're pulling the whole world inside so you can shape it before you respond. That's not about control. That's about depth, about being awake in the presence of another person. This kind of noticing, it requires effort. Discipline, even. But that's the cost of meaning. Most people skate through conversations, interactions, even relationships, without ever truly engaging with what's right in front of them. They rely on scripts. You look great. You're amazing. You're so sweet. Fine. Shallow. Easy. Disposable. And it's not that those things are wrong. It's just that they're everywhere. They don't set you apart. Touch someone. But when you tell her Notice the way you offered your scarf to that stranger without hesitating. It said something about how naturally generous you are. Now you've given her a mirror she's never held before, and that can change everything. It's in those moments, the quiet, precise acknowledgments of the unnoticed, that the real bond begins. You're not just speaking to her, you're reflecting her. You're helping her see herself more clearly. That's powerful. That's lasting. Women remember the man who notices what everyone else missed. Deeply meaningful in recognizing the effect a person has on others, not just who they are in isolation, but who they are in as relation. Because whether we like it or not, we don't exist alone. We radiate, we ripple. We affect people around us constantly, whether through our words, our silence, our energy, or our presence. And when you notice the Z impact a woman has on you, on others, on the atmosphere in a room, you're doing something very rare. You're acknowledging her as a force, not just a figure. This kind of compliment doesn't focus on the static. It speaks to motion. It says, here's what happens when you enter a space. That's a different level of recognition because it's no longer just about her traits, about her seek effect. And that's what people remember most in this life. Not what someone looked like or even what they said, how that person made them feel. So when you tell a woman a calm that seems to follow you, or you have this way of making people feel understood, that's not flattery. That's insight. Insight builds trust. It's not a line. It's an observation, and it reveals more about ZU too, because it shows that you're watching with care, not just with interest. It shows you're tuned into something beyond the immediate. You're not just analyzing her, you're experiencing her. You're taking a moment to articulate the way she changes her environment. And that's significant because not many people do that. People are so absorbed in themselves that they never stopped notice what someone else contributes to the emotional tone of a room or to the lives of those around them. And the beautiful thing is, this kind of compliment reaches beyond vanity. It taps into identity. A woman might know she's beautiful. She might even hear that 100 times a week. But when you say how people speak more openly around you, they trust you without realizing it. That might be something she's first never heard. And yet, she ethas needs to hear because it validates something meaningful, something rooted in character, in presence, in influence. You can feel it too, can't you? When someone has a positive impact, it changes your posture, your tone, your sense of security. If you're around someone who lifts others up without even trying, you start to feel lighter just by being near them. So say it. Let her know. Don't keep that insight to yourself. It's not just a kindness, it's a reflection. It's giving her a chance to recognize the good she brings into the world, often unconsciously. And there's responsibility in that too, because if you recognize a woman's impact and you speak to it clearly and sincerely, you're not just strengthening the bond between you, you're offering her a deeper understanding of her role in the lives of others. That her presence isn't just background noise, it matters. It shapes people. It leaves a trail. That's powerful. We all want to feel that we matter, that we're not invisible, that we leave some kind of mark. When you give that to her in the form of a thoughtful, precise compliment, you're not just giving her a nice moment. You're offering her something lasting, something she'll carry, something she'll remember. It's not just about who she is, it's about what happens when she shows up. One of the most powerful things you can do for someone, anyone, but especially a woman you admire, is to recognize and affirm her strength, kind of strength that's loud or attention seeking, but the quiet, consistent kind that shows up when life is heavy, that keeps going when it would be easier to fall apart. And when you compliment that, not in a vague, superficial way, in a way that's anchored in something you've actually witnessed, you're not just handing her a compliment. You're reinforcing a part of her that may have been tested, maybe even doubted. You see, people often assume that confident women don't need to hear affirmations, that somehow they're immune to self-doubt. But that's a mistake. Everyone, no matter how composed they appear, benefits from knowing that their efforts, their endurance, their resilience are seen. In fact, for strong people, that recognition matters even more. They often carry the weight for others without ever being asked how's they're holding up. They're expected to be okay, to always handle things. When you say to a woman, I really admire how steady you were during that whole situation, or it's incredible how you kept your values intact through all of that, you're doing more than noticing. You're telling her that her effort is not invisible. This isn't about praise for the sake of praise. This is about acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is what validates our experiences. When a woman hears, I see how hard you've worked to stay grounded, even when everything around you is chaotic, it tells her something essential, that her strength has meaning and that it hasn't gone unnoticed. Kind of healing in that, a kind of restoration. Because so much of what we go through in life, we go through without applause. You want to connect with someone. Show them you understand not just who they are, but what it's cost them to become that person. That's the real compliment. Not just you're so driven, but I can tell you've had to push through some things to stay this driven. That takes character. That reveals empathy. And empathy builds trust. Trust makes people open up. And when someone opens up, that's when real connection happens. There's also a subtle but vital shift here. Just admiring results. You're admiring us process. That's a rare thing. Most people only comment when they see the final product, the award, the polished version. But when you say, I know that didn't come easy, the way you handled that with grace, you're valuing the inner strength that powered it. That's personal. That's deep. Confidence isn't always loud. Often, it's the quiet woman in the room, observing carefully, thinking deeply, who has the most to offer. So many men miss that. They look for sparkle, for charisma. But there's a different kind of magnetism in a woman who knows who she is and doesn't need to prove it. When you point that out, when you say, I respect how grounded you are, it's rare. You're not just giving her a compliment. You're giving her permission to own that part of herself more fully. These aren't lines. They're truths. And when spoken sincerely, they land in a place far beneath the surface. They stick because people don't forget the moments when their strength was named, when it was affirmed, when someone cared enough to look beyond the obvious and say, I see what you've built in yourself, and it's worth admiring. We underestimate how deeply people want to be appreciated for the things they give, not because they expect something in return, because giving is how they express love. And for many women, especially those who are emotionally generous, their nurturing instinct is not a strategy or performance. It's embedded in who they are. They'll offer support when you're struggling. They'll remember the little things that make you feel understood. They'll often do it quietly without announcing it or asking for recognition. But just because someone doesn't ask to be seen doesn't mean they don't need to be. And that's where you come in, not just as a man who wants to be close to her, but as someone who is awake enough to reflect back the good she puts into the world. When you say, I really value how deeply you care, or you make people feel safe just by how you listen, you're doing something that matters far more than you might realize. You're letting her know that her warmth hasn't gone unnoticed. Kind of acknowledgement doesn't just affirm her, it rewards very qualities we should want more of in the world. Most people are so caught up in what they can get from others that they forget to appreciate what's already being offered. If you take a moment to point out the kind of emotional space a woman creates, her kindness, her attentiveness, her empathy, you create a dynamic that's more than attraction. You create a foundation of mutual care. And care is what sustains intimacy. The intensity of feeling in a single moment, it's the quality of attention over time. So when she hears from you, I admire how naturally you make people feel at ease, it encourages her to stay open, to keep offering the same generosity without feeling depleted or overlooked. About manipulation. It's about honesty. The truth is we are deeply shaped by how we're received. When someone receives our emotional labor with gratitude and clarity, we feel stronger in it. When you compliment a woman for how she gives, whether that's emotional support, thoughtful presence, or quiet acts of love, you're helping her feel as seen in the places where she's most human. And that is incredibly rare. Too many people confuse giving with weakness or take nurturing behavior for granted as if it's just the default setting in someone's personality. Real giving, the kind that asks nothing, that's born out of character, not performance, that is not weakness. That's strength under control. That's maturity. That's wisdom. And when you recognize that in a woman, it tells her you value not just what she offers, who she had to become to be someone who gives like that. You're acknowledging her emotional integrity, her character, that goes far deeper than surface admiration. Trust is built on. There's something powerful about being with someone who brings light into a room, not by trying to impress, by simply showing up with empathy and attention. And when you notice that light and you say so, you're not only honoring her, you're strengthening your connection to the very best part of her. Because in a world that often takes and rarely thanks, who recognizes quiet generosity becomes unforgettable.